So good morning again, everybody. We started 15 minutes ago. Play catch up if you can. We did deal with the week that was. Um, this morning, I'd like us to revisit the subject I started last week, the duty to rebel. So this is actually, let me say for now, should be the conclusion to that because there aren't too many excuses to be offered for anyone who still believes that there is another pathway to resolve our many challenges. I'm convinced we have only one pathway, and that is the revolutionary path. Maybe the difference between myself and most of the people who speak to a revolution is that I believe they are aligned to the duty to rebel, which is essentially what must happen before you have a revolution. Aligned to that duty to rebel is also a duty to reconstitute. The duty to reconstitute is hinged on a plan for the day after the rebellion. In the absence of a plan to reconstitute, what you have is anarchy. That is when they talk about bloody revolutions. Because at the end of anarchy, the prevailing will that has overwhelming force, in the absence of a plan, imposes order. That is why they speak in terms of the bloodiness of this and the bloodiness of that. And it also happens sometimes when those who believe they have superior ideas do not find the patience and the maturity to speak to the people on whose behalf they presume to rebel. So you have violence because one side is seeking to impose its will on the other. I, on the other hand, believe that if you have an alliance of the people who are the ones who have been depraved and deprived by the system, who are obviously by far more in superior numbers to the beneficiaries of the system, if you can have that and you spend the time to explain the issues to the people and they have clarity as to what comes the day after, a critical mass of such persons, educated and clear in the understanding of what needs to be done, would be sufficient to ensure that violence is not required. And this is where we need to begin to understand the duty to rebel. Kant spoke essentially to the restoration of dignity. There are multiple reasons why we must rebel, and I've spoken to those extensively last week. But I'll recap before coming to the duty to restore the dignity of the self. The basis of the state, whether that is the Nigerian state or any state, is always for the protection of the interests of the citizens. At least that is the lie that the social compact theory tells for the emergence of the state. I have explained extensively last week. I took my time to explain that Nigeria is not your classic state. It was not found on the back of the common will of the people. It is a colonial contraction. Multiple states, multiple ethnicities were bundled together to create the state called Nigeria, and it's certainly important for the benefit of those called Nigerians. It never was, and it is only up to us to find the common purpose to which to put Nigeria. In the absence of that, it will continue to serve its original beneficiaries and their local administrators. Nigeria does not serve the Nigerians. But even if we admit to the fallacy of a state serving its people, which will mean that you have citizens in place of the victims that Nigerians truly have. Even if we admit to that, let's take on that delusion. At its most basic level, the manifest duty of the state, the first of its many duties, is the protection of lives and properties. Just last week, a Brigadier General, Oseni Momoh Braimo, was killed alongside his troop, another officer, a captain, a master sergeant, and a private soldier. Probably more, because the first casualty in any war is the minimization of the casualty figures by propaganda. So lies become currency in wars. And if the Nigerian army would have us believe that a general died, a captain died, a master sergeant died, and a private soldier, and these are not merely representatives of the classes of loss that occurred at Benishek, who are we to argue? But even by its own admission, this past week, a brigadier general was overrun in his base. Now, let's understand that the Benishek base, like almost every other base in the Northeast and in every theater of war, you're not talking about a checkpoint. You're talking about proper hardened perimeters, even if it is not fenced, but hardened perimeters with armor, with multiple layers of security. And then in his inner core, you have the command structure. This brigadier general heading this base didn't run into an ambush in the same manner as Musa Uba, the brigadier that was killed by ISWAP in November 2025. No, he was on his own base, the point from where he is meant to project power into the neighboring towns and communities in order to protect them. So we're not talking about a random hit. We're talking about a hardened compound from where the people in the locality are meant to draw hope of security. This hardened shell was attacked by Boko Haram terrorists. The same ones that the Chief of Defense Staff, the same one that the Chief of Army Staff, the same one that the Defense Minister will tell you are your brothers. They overran this place. Ikú tó ń pa ojúgbà ẹni, òwe ńlá ló ń pa fún ni. The death that kills your neighbor and friend is merely sending you advance notice of your own mortality. If terrorists would attack a hardened compound where a brigadier general was present and they fought for over 4 hours, it was reported that the attack began at 12 a.m. and lasted until daybreak. The Nigerian Air Force that could bomb in Benin was nowhere to be found at Benishek. No helicopters were deployed to Benishek. No jet went to Benishek. The base was overrun. The brigadier general was murdered. The state failed even its own primary servants in the business of protection. The same country that can afford to buy yachts for the president. The same country that is capable of maintaining multiple jets in the presidential fleet. That same country could not deploy anything in aid of a brigadier general. Years of training lost. Human lives lost. Nigeria daily advertises its incapacity to secure the lives and properties of Nigerians. The president himself is a hostage in power. When and at what point is the citizen or victim obliged to take his own fate in his hand when the state is advertising its failure? Now, if the failure were to be singular, it will be bad enough. But the same state that is incapable of protecting generals is credibly accused of complicity in the growth and spread of terrorism. I'm told Baraja is denying having said anything about importation of terrorists. Fair enough. Let's leave that. What about Commodore Lawumi, who told all of us that since 2016, the Nigerian state, the government of Buhari, was given a dossier setting out the names of sponsors of terrorism in Nigeria. They are comprised of persons in government. Should we ignore what Jonathan also told us during his own regime? Jonathan told us that he had Boko Haram in his government. The point is this: at what point are we going to come to the knowledge of the fact that those whose duty is meant to be our protection have compromised our security? Whether that be the political class or the military. And that is why its own men, generals, are being killed like chicken. A general had his position overrun, but in fact, he was ambushed by ISWAP, November 2025. General Musa Uba, dead. And that was it. Multiple layers of betrayals alleged for the failure that led to his death. Oseni Momoh Braimo, another brigadier general last week. These are generals. That's why we are hearing about it. But Yoruba says, Ibita Beru Labiomo, a slave is battered in the exact same manner as the freeborn. What about the private soldiers, the corporals, the sergeants who are given AK-47 rifles that jam when the persons they are confronting are carrying more sophisticated weapons? Weapons that are purchased from the proceeds of kidnapping every day. Nigerians are being hunted and kidnapped. And so we're talking about a situation where the duty to rebel, even if only in relation to the failure of the state to protect lives and property, it has become existential. That duty is existential. Look, if we say, let's legislate against this madness by resorting to legal actions, exactly what opportunities for redress has our judiciary offered? At every level, all you find is putrefaction. The knowledge that the judiciary, that should be the last hope of the common man, is part and parcel of the system of oppression that has been erected in the place of justice. The judiciary is complicit. Look at Amukwita, a professor of law. Professor of law. If you're using ranking, that is another general. He's alive, but he is lost to the critical thinking's club, is lost. He has become so existential that he was being bad enough that he could be so brazen in his partisanship, denying what should not be denied in order to save a job. Amukito can't be less than 60 years old. How long are we going to live that we continue to make these existential choices that we should be ashamed of? Look, one of the duties of the state is to provide justice. And one of the things we say in law is that justice must not only be done, it must be seen to have been done. How can you say justice is being done in Nigeria? Explain it to me. Jackson only got a reprieve after he had been convicted and sentenced to death by the Supreme Court. All the courts affirmed his sentences to death because he killed a Fulani man who attacked him on his own farm. He used the guy's knife after he had sustained multiple injuries. That is the judiciary of Nigeria. That same judiciary found a way to allow somebody like Akpabio, who was manifestly unqualified, to end up in the Senate, and he is today the Senate president. The man can't even walk, he shuffles. And we laugh at Biya in Cameroon when our situation is much worse. They have broken the social compact. Nigeria has become a banana republic. It's not subject or anchored to any laws. Lawan is there in the Senate. He contested the presidency. These persons were expressly barred by law. But the law does not matter. The courts do not matter. The laws be damned, because the law is what the court says the law is. Judgments are now given as though you have arrived at the answer and you are walking back to the question. Shamelessly, brazenly. And we're supposed to believe in a legal order. If you believe that there is an existing legal order in Nigeria outside of the whims and caprices of men, I pity you. Probably have some dollars for you to come and wash.